I was standing on my private airstrip at 6 in the morning, watching the sunrise paint the Colorado mountains gold, when I heard the roar of an engine that wasn't coming from the sky. A white Lexus SUV bounced down my access road, kicking up dust and gravel, before screeching to a halt 20 feet from where I stood. The woman who emerged looked like she'd been storing rage in a pressure cooker for decades, and I was about to become her release valve. "Are you Aaron Vance?" she demanded, marching toward me in designer athleisure wear that probably cost more than most people's monthly mortgage. "That's me," I said, keeping my voice neutral. I'd learned long ago that staying calm was the best defense against people looking for a fight. "I'm Patricia Lundgren, president of the Clearwater Peaks Homeowners Association. We need to talk about this." She swept her arm dramatically toward my airstrip, a well-maintained grass runway that stretched across my property. I crossed my arms. "What about it?" "This is completely unacceptable. The noise, the disruption, the safety hazard. I've received no fewer than 17 complaints from residents about aircraft using this strip at all hours." "I've owned this property for 8 years, I said. "The airstrip was here when I bought it. It was built in the 70s by the previous owner, who was a bush pilot. Everything's been properly registered with the FAA since day one." Patricia's perfectly made-up face twisted into a scowl. "I don't care if it was built by the Wright brothers themselves. The HOA covenants clearly state that no commercial operations can be conducted on residential property." "This isn't commercial. I use it for personal recreation. I'm a pilot. I fly a Cessna 182. "I've seen helicopters landing here," she snapped. That made me pause. "The air ambulance, you mean?" "Whatever it is, it's disruptive and dangerous." I took a deep breath, trying to maintain my patience. "Madam, that helicopter saves lives. We're at the base of the Clearwater Peak Trail System. When hikers get injured or lost up there, the air ambulance needs a place to land that's close. My property is the nearest flat, clear area to the trailheads. I gave them permission to use it for emergency landings." "Did you get HOA approval for that?" Patricia demanded. "I didn't think I needed approval to help save people's lives." "The rules exist for everyone's benefit, Mr. Vance. You don't get to decide which ones apply to you." She pulled a folded document from her oversized purse. "This is a cease and desist order from the HOA. As of today, no aircraft of any kind are permitted to use this airstrip. If you fail to comply, you'll be fined $1,000 per day." I stared at her, genuinely shocked. "You can't be serious." "I'm completely serious. The board voted unanimously last night. You have 24 hours to notify any relevant parties that this runway is no longer available for use." "People could die," I said slowly, making sure she understood. "If the air ambulance can't land here, they'll have to fly an extra 15 minutes to the hospital helipad. In a medical emergency, that could be the difference between life and death." Patricia's expression didn't soften one bit. "Then I suggest injured hikers be more careful. Perhaps if rescue services weren't so readily available, people would think twice before taking unnecessary risks in the wilderness." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. That's the most callous thing I've ever heard anyone say. "That's your opinion. The HOA has made its decision. Comply or face the consequences." She turned on her heel and marched back to her Lexus. I stood there watching her drive away, the cease and desist notice crumpling in my clenched fist. 8 years. I'd lived here for 8 years without a single problem. The HOA had never bothered me before. Hell, I barely knew we had an HOA until I got the occasional newsletter in the mail about community barbecues and reminders to keep our properties looking nice. My phone rang. It was Travis Chen, the flight paramedic who usually crewed the air ambulance. "Hey, Aaron, wanted to give you a heads up. We got a call from some HOA lady saying we're not allowed to use your strip anymore. What's that about?" I sighed. "I just got ambushed by the HOA president. She served me with some kind of cease and desist." "Are you kidding me? That strip has been crucial for us. Last month alone, we had 4 emergency evacuations from the Clearwater trails. Without your property, our response time increases significantly." "I know. I'm going to fight this, Travis. Don't worry. We might not have a choice in the short term. Our legal department is freaking out about liability. If we land there after you've been officially told not to allow it, the county could be sued." My stomach dropped. So what are you saying? I'm saying that unless you can get this resolved fast, we're going to have to reroute to the hospital pad. I hate it, but that's the reality. After we hung up, I went inside my house and called my lawyer, Marcus Hayes. He'd handled my property purchase years ago and had helped me with a few minor issues since then. Aaron, good to hear from you, Marcus said cheerfully. What can I do for you? I explained the situation, reading him the exact wording of the HOA notice. Marcus was quiet for a moment. Do you have a copy of your HOA covenants? Somewhere in my files. I haven't looked at them in years. Find them. I need to see exactly what restrictions exist and what enforcement authority the HOA actually has. In the meantime, don't do anything rash. If they're claiming covenant violations, there's a process that has to be followed. They can't just impose fines without proper notice in a hearing. She said the board voted unanimously. Doesn't matter. You're entitled to due process. Let me make some calls. I'll get back to you by this afternoon. I spent the next hour digging through my home office files until I found the HOA documents. They were dense, boring, and filled with the kind of bureaucratic language that made my eyes glaze over. But I forced myself to read through them. Most of it was standard stuff. Keep your lawn maintained, no parking RVs in your driveway, no exterior paint colors without approval. Then I found the section Patricia had referenced. Commercial operations were indeed prohibited on residential properties, but there was nothing specifically about airstrips or aircraft. My property was zoned as residential agricultural, which gave me more latitude than a typical suburban lot. The airstrip predated the HOA, which had only been formed 12 years ago when the area started developing more rapidly. I'd assumed that meant it was grandfathered in. Marcus called back around 2 in the afternoon. Okay, I've done some digging. The good news is that Patricia is overstepping her authority. She can't just unilaterally impose fines. The bad news is that the HOA can call for a special hearing to address what they consider covenant violations. So what do? You respond in writing, requesting a formal hearing before the board. At that hearing, you'll present your case for why the airstrip doesn't violate the covenants. You'll want to emphasize that it's not a commercial operation, that it existed before the HOA, and that it serves a vital public safety function. How long does this process take? They have to give you at least 10 days' notice for a hearing. Realistically, we're looking at 2 to 3 weeks before this gets resolved one way or another. Travis said the air ambulance can't use the strip while this is pending. That's probably wise from a liability standpoint. But Aaron, there's something else you should know. I called the county planning department. Your airstrip is on record with them. It's a legal, pre-existing, non-conforming use. Even if the HOA wants to shut it down, they may not have the authority to override county regulations. That gave me a spark of hope. So I might win this? You've got a strong case, but HOAs can be persistent, and litigation is expensive. Let's take this one step at a time. I drafted a response to the HOA that evening, requesting a formal hearing. Marcus reviewed it, and we sent it certified mail the next morning. Then, I contacted the county planning office myself to confirm what Marcus had told me. The woman I spoke with, Jennifer Pace, was helpful. Yes, Mr. Vance, your airstrip is documented in our records. It was established in 1974 and has been continuously used since then. As a pre-existing use, it's protected, even though current zoning wouldn't allow a new private airstrip to be built. Can an HOA override that? Not to my knowledge. HOAs can enforce their own covenants, but they can't contradict county land use regulations. You might want to get something in writing from our office confirming the legal status of your airstrip. That would be incredibly helpful. She promised to have a letter prepared within a few days. I thanked her profusely and hung up feeling slightly more optimistic. But my optimism didn't last long. That weekend, I woke up to find orange construction fencing blocking the entrance to my airstrip access road. There was a chain with a padlock and a sign that read, "Closed by order of Clearwater Peaks HOA." I was furious. I grabbed my bolt cutters from the garage and cut through the chain. The fence came down in about 30 seconds. I dragged it to the side of the road and went back inside to call Marcus. "They're escalating," he said grimly when I told him what happened. "That's trespassing. They put up barriers on your private property without permission. Can I file charges? You could, but it might hurt us in the long run. We don't want to look unreasonable. Document everything. Take photos. If they do it again, we'll consider getting a restraining order. The HOA hearing was scheduled for a Thursday evening, 18 days after Patricia's initial ambush. The meeting was held at the community clubhouse, a nice building with a view of the mountains. I arrived with Marcus at 6:30, 15 minutes early. The room was already packed. I recognized a few neighbors, but most of the faces were unfamiliar. Patricia sat at a table at the front with 4 other board members. She saw me come in and her expression hardened. "This should be interesting," Marcus muttered. The meeting was called to order at 6:45. There were several routine items on the agenda first, all of which passed quickly with minimal discussion. Then Patricia announced, "Next item, the matter of Aaron Vance and the unauthorized airstrip." "Point of order," Marcus said, standing. "The airstrip is not unauthorized. It's a legal, documented facility that predates this HOA." Patricia's smile was icy. "You'll have an opportunity to present your case, Mr. Hayes. Please wait your turn." She proceeded to describe the problem in the most inflammatory terms possible. She talked about noise complaints, safety concerns, and property values. She claimed that low-flying aircraft were terrorizing children and elderly residents. She even suggested that my airstrip was attracting undesirable elements to the neighborhood. It was complete nonsense, and I could feel my blood pressure rising with every word. Finally, she said, "Mr. Vance, you may now present your response." Marcus and I stood. Marcus did most of the talking, which was good because I was barely containing my anger. "The airstrip was established in 1974, Marcus explained. "It was documented with the county and the FAA. When Mr. Vance purchased his property, the airstrip was part of the legal description. It's a pre-existing non-conforming use, which means it's protected under county regulations." He handed out copies of the letter from the county planning office confirming this. "Furthermore," Marcus continued, "the airstrip serves a vital public safety function. The medical helicopter service uses it for emergency evacuations from the Clearwater Peak Trail system. Without this landing zone, response times increase by 15 to 20 minutes. In medical emergencies, that delay can be fatal." One of the other board members, a man named Gregory, spoke up. "That's very noble, Mr. Vance, but the HOA has a responsibility to all residents. We can't prioritize one person's hobby over the well-being of the entire community." "It's not a hobby," I said, unable to stay quiet any longer. "It's literally about saving lives," Patricia cut in. "Mr. Vance, you're being dramatic. There are other ways to rescue injured hikers." "Not as effectively. Ask the paramedics, ask the families of people who've been saved because the helicopter could land on my property instead of flying an extra 20 minutes round trip." "Do you have any documentation of these supposed rescues?" Patricia asked. Marcus pulled out another set of papers. "I subpoenaed the flight logs from the county emergency services. In the past 18 months, there have been 11 emergency landings at Mr. Vance's airstrip. 4 of those cases were classified as life-threatening injuries where time was critical." The board members looked at the documents, and I saw a few of them exchange uncertain glances. Maybe we were getting through to them. But Patricia wasn't backing down. "Those services can adapt. Mr. Vance doesn't have a monopoly on flat land." "Actually, Mrs. Lundgren, geography disagrees with you," Marcus said. "The nearest alternative landing zone is the hospital helipad, which is 17 miles farther from the trailheads. The next nearest is a field owned by the Forest Service, which requires special authorization and adds 12 minutes to response time." "Still, the HOA covenants are clear," Patricia insisted. "No commercial operations." "The airstrip is not a commercial operation. Mr. Vance doesn't charge anyone to use it. He's not running a business. He flies his personal aircraft and has graciously allowed emergency services to use his property in crisis situations." The board went into a closed session to deliberate. Marcus and I were asked to wait outside. The 20 minutes we spent in the hallway felt like hours. When we were called back in, Patricia announced the decision. "The board has voted 3-2 to uphold the cease and desist order. Mr. Vance, you are prohibited from operating the airstrip for any purpose. You have 30 days to notify all relevant parties. If aircraft continue to use your property after that deadline, you will be fined $1,000 per incident. My heart sank. You're making a mistake. The decision is final, Patricia said coldly. This meeting is adjourned. Outside in the parking lot, Marcus put a hand on my shoulder. We're not done. We'll file an appeal with the county. If necessary, we'll take this to court. How long will that take? Months, probably, but we have a strong case. People don't have months, Marcus. The next hiker who gets injured and needs that helicopter might not have months. He didn't have an answer for that. I drove home feeling defeated. I'd done everything right, followed the rules, and I was still losing. The HOA had the power, and they were using it in the most short-sighted, cruel way possible. The next morning, I called Travis to give him the bad news. Damn, he said quietly. I was hoping you'd win that hearing. Me too. Marcus says we can appeal, but it's going to take time. I'll let the team know. We'll adjust our protocols. But Aaron, I want you to know that what you tried to do here matters. A lot of us in emergency services deal with this kind of bureaucratic nonsense all the time. It's frustrating as hell. 2 weeks later, on a Wednesday afternoon, I was working in my home office when I heard the distinctive sound of a helicopter approaching. I looked out the window and saw the air ambulance circling my property. My stomach clenched. They weren't supposed to be here. I ran outside and watched as the helicopter made a low pass over the airstrip, then banked away toward the south. Something was wrong. A few minutes later, my phone rang. It was Travis, and he sounded stressed. Aaron, we've got a situation. 23-year-old male, fell about 40 feet climbing on Clearwater Peak. Multiple fractures, possible internal bleeding. We need to get him to a trauma center immediately, but there's a problem. What problem? The winds are gusting over 30 knots from the west. The hospital helipad is in a wind shadow created by the building. It's dangerous to land there in these conditions. We'd normally divert to your strip, but obviously we can't. Travis, forget the HOA. Land here. Save this kid's life. I can't make that call. My supervisor would have my job, and the county could face a massive lawsuit from the HOA. Then put me on with your supervisor. There was a brief pause, then a new voice came on the line. Mr. Vance, this is Daniel Morrison, Operations Chief for County Emergency Medical Services. Chief Morrison, you need to land that helicopter on my property. I'm giving you explicit permission. I don't care what the HOA says. Sir, I appreciate that, but we have to consider the legal ramifications. Your HOA has made it clear that aircraft are not permitted on your property. If we land there, they could sue the county for millions. And if you don't land here, that kid might die. Which liability are you more comfortable with? There was a long silence. Then Morrison said, Hold on. I could hear muffled voices in the background, people arguing. Then Morrison came back. We're coming in. Clear anyone from the landing zone. It's clear. Come now. I ran to the airstrip and waited. The helicopter appeared over the ridge 2 minutes later, fighting the crosswind as it descended. The pilot was skilled, compensating for the gusts, and set down smoothly on the grass. The rotors stayed spinning as 2 paramedics jumped out with a stretcher. I stayed well back, watching as they loaded the patient. Even from a distance, I could see the kid was in bad shape. His leg was bent at an unnatural angle, and there was blood on his clothing. The paramedics worked quickly, securing him, then climbed back aboard. The helicopter lifted off, nose dipping as it accelerated toward the hospital. The whole thing had taken less than 3 minutes. I went back inside, knowing there would be consequences, but not regretting my decision for a second. The consequences came the next day via certified mail. A notice from the HOA informing me that I had violated the cease and desist order and was being fined $1,000. There was also a letter from Patricia Lundgren personally, threatening further legal action. I forwarded everything to Marcus. This is good, actually, he said when we spoke on the phone. How is being fined $1,000 good? Because now we have standing to challenge the HOA in court. Before, it was theoretical. Now you've suffered actual damages. We can file a lawsuit arguing that the HOA is exceeding its authority and causing harm to public safety. How much is this going to cost me? A few thousand in legal fees, probably. But Aaron, there's another angle we should consider, the media. This is a compelling story. HOA blocks airstrip used for medical emergencies. Local man fights to save lives. It's the kind of thing that generates public pressure. I wasn't sure how I felt about that. I wasn't looking for attention, but if it would help resolve this situation, maybe it was worth considering. Let me think about it, I said. That weekend, another hiker was injured on the trails. This time it was a 58-year-old woman who'd suffered a heart attack. The air ambulance had to fly directly to the hospital helipad, and the delay in response time was critical. She survived, but according to Travis, it was close. 10 more minutes and we would have lost her, he told me. I know we can't use your strip, but man, it's killing us. That made up my mind. I called Marcus. Contact the media. Let's tell this story. He got in touch with a reporter from the Denver Post named Rachel Kowalski. She drove up to interview me the following Tuesday. Rachel was in her mid-30s, sharp and thorough. She asked good questions and actually seemed to care about the facts. This is an unusual situation, she said, recording our conversation on her phone. HOAs usually deal with lawn maintenance and fence heights, not life-and-death medical emergencies. Walk me through how this all started. I told her everything. The ambush by Patricia, the hearing, the fines, the injured hikers. Rachel took notes and asked for documentation, which I provided. She also interviewed Travis and got statements from the County Emergency Services Department. 3 days later, the article ran on the front page of the Post's regional section. HOA grounds medical helicopter. Fight over private airstrip puts lives at risk. The article was balanced but damning. It quoted Patricia saying the HOA had a responsibility to enforce its covenants, but it also included statistics about response times and quotes from paramedics about the importance of the airstrip. There was a photo of me standing next to my Cessna with the mountains in the background. The story went viral. Within 24 hours, it had been picked up by local TV stations. By the weekend, it was on national news. My phone wouldn't stop ringing with interview requests. I did a few TV appearances, always making the same points. This wasn't about me. This was about saving lives. The HOA was putting bureaucracy ahead of basic human decency. The public response was overwhelming. The HOA's Facebook page was flooded with angry comments. Patricia's personal social media accounts got so much negative attention that she made them private. The local Reddit community organized a petition demanding the HOA reverse its decision. Within a week, it had over 15,000 signatures. But Patricia doubled down. She issued a statement saying the HOA wouldn't be swayed by media pressure and that rules existed for good reasons. She accused me of orchestrating a publicity campaign to avoid accountability. Then things got interesting. I received a call from Melinda Garrison, one of the board members who'd voted against Patricia at the hearing. Mr. Vance, I wanted to reach out privately, she said. I think what Patricia is doing is wrong. So does Gregory Chen. We voted against the cease and desist, but we were outvoted 3-2. I remember. I appreciate your support. There's something you should know. Several residents are collecting signatures to force a special election to recall Patricia and the other board members who voted with her. If they get enough signatures, we could have a new board within 60 days. That would be amazing. I can't promise anything, but I thought you should know that not everyone in this community agrees with Patricia. That gave me hope. Maybe the tide was turning. 2 weeks after the article ran, I got a call from the county attorney's office. They wanted to meet with me and Marcus to discuss the situation. We drove to the county offices on a Thursday morning. The county attorney, Barbara Stevenson, was a woman in her 50s with a no-nonsense demeanor. Mr. Vance, I'll be direct, she said after we sat down. Your situation has created a significant problem for the county. Our emergency medical services need that airstrip. It's become clear that response times are materially impacted without it. We've had 2 close calls in the past month alone. I've been trying to tell people that, I said. I know. The problem is that we're in a legal gray area. The HOA claims it has the authority to restrict use of your property. You claim they don't. Until a court resolves this, our paramedics are stuck in the middle. So what do you suggest? The county is prepared to intervene. We're going to file an amicus brief supporting your position if this goes to court. We're also going to send a formal letter to the HOA advising them that their restrictions interfere with county emergency operations. Marcus leaned forward. Will that have any teeth? It should. HOAs don't like fighting counties. It's expensive and they usually lose. Our hope is that this pressure, combined with the public backlash, will convince them to back down. And And if it doesn't? I asked. Then we go to court and let a judge decide. But Mr. Vance, I'll be honest with you, litigation is slow. Even with the county's support, this could take 6 months to a year to fully resolve. I felt my frustration rising again. So what happens in the meantime? More hikers die because the helicopter has to fly an extra 20 minutes? Barbara's expression was sympathetic but firm. We're doing everything we can within the bounds of the law. That's all I can promise. The county's letter to the HOA was delivered the next week. It was stern, warning that the HOA's actions were interfering with public safety operations and could result in legal action. It demanded an immediate reversal of the cease and desist order. Patricia's response was predictable. She issued a statement saying the HOA would not be bullied by the county or the media and that they were consulting with their own attorneys. But behind the scenes, cracks were forming. The recall effort was gaining momentum. More than 200 residents had signed the petition, well over the threshold needed to force a special election. Patricia tried to challenge the validity of the signatures, but an independent review confirmed they were legitimate. The special election was scheduled for the first Tuesday in October, about 6 weeks away. In the meantime, hiking season was in full swing, and the Clearwater Peak trails were busy. I held my breath every time I heard a helicopter, wondering if there was another emergency, another person whose life was being put at risk because of Patricia's stubborn refusal to see reason. On a Friday afternoon in early September, my worst fears were realized. I was in my garage working on my Cessna when I heard someone shouting. I stepped outside and saw a man running down the access road toward my property. He was young, maybe mid-20s, wearing hiking gear and absolutely panicked. "Are you Aaron Vance?" he yelled. "Yes, what's wrong?" "My girlfriend. We were hiking on Clearwater Peak and she fell. She's hurt bad. I called 911, but they said the helicopter can't land here anymore. They have to go to the hospital first and then come back. Please, isn't there anything you can do?" My mind raced. Where is she? About a mile up the trail. She fell off a ledge. She's bleeding and I think her back is hurt. She can't move. Did the dispatcher say how long until help arrives? They said maybe 45 minutes, maybe longer. Please, she needs help now. I made a split-second decision. Come on. I ran to my Cessna. The kid followed me, confused. What are you doing? I can't land a helicopter here, but I can fly my plane. Get in. But you're not a paramedic. No, but I have a first aid kit and I can get to her faster than anyone else. We'll stabilize her and wait for the ground rescue team. He hesitated for only a second, then climbed into the passenger seat. I did a quick pre-flight check, started the engine, and taxied to the runway. 2 minutes later, we were airborne. The Clearwater Peak area was rugged, with steep terrain and limited clearings. I circled over the trailhead, and the kid pointed down at a spot maybe a mile up the trail. There, that's where we were. I could see a small figure on a rocky outcropping, the girlfriend, sitting awkwardly, not moving much. Okay, here's the problem, I said. There's nowhere nearby for me to land this plane, but I can see a clearing about a quarter mile from her position. It's going to be tight, but I think I can put down there. Do it. I spiraled down, assessing the clearing. It was barely long enough for my Cessna, and the surface looked rough, but it would have to work. I lined up my approach, reduced power, and brought the plane in low and slow. The touchdown was rough, the plane bouncing over uneven ground, but we made it. I brought the Cessna to a stop with maybe 50 feet to spare. Let's go, I said, grabbing my first aid kit. We ran through the forest, following the trail. The terrain was steep and rocky. My lungs burned from the altitude and exertion. But we reached the girlfriend in less than 10 minutes. She was in her early 20s, pale and clearly in shock. Her name was Tessa, and she'd fallen about 15 feet onto a rock ledge. Her right arm was bent at a horrible angle, and there was a deep gash on her forehead. But what worried me most was the way she was sitting, rigid and still. I can't feel my legs, she whispered when we reached her. I tried to move and I can't feel them. Spinal injury. This was bad. Okay, Tessa, I'm Aaron. I'm a pilot and I have some first aid training. We're not going to move you, okay? We're going to keep you as still as possible until the rescue team gets here. I opened my kit and pulled out gauze and antiseptic. The head wound was bleeding, but not too badly. I cleaned it as gently as I could and applied pressure. "Where's the helicopter?" the boyfriend asked desperately. "It can't land at my airstrip anymore. There's a ground team coming, but they're going to take a while to reach us." "She needs a hospital now." "I know, but moving her without proper equipment could make things worse. We're going to stabilize her as best we can and wait." I used the supplies I had to control the bleeding and keep Tessa calm. I checked her vitals constantly. Her pulse was weak and fast. She was going into shock. 20 minutes passed, then 30. I called 911 on my cell phone to get an update. "Ground rescue is en route," the dispatcher told me. "ETA 25 minutes to your location. The patient is deteriorating. She needs advanced medical care." "We're doing the best we can, sir." I hung up, frustrated and scared. This was exactly the scenario I'd been warning about. Every minute counted, and we were wasting them because of Patricia Lundgren's stubborn pride. 45 minutes after we'd arrived, the ground rescue team finally reached us. They had a spine board and proper medical equipment. 2 paramedics took over, stabilizing Tessa's neck and carefully moving her onto the board. "She needs to get to a trauma center," one of them said. "We're going to carry her down to the ambulance, but it's going to be at least another hour before we get her to the hospital." I felt sick. An hour. In the time we'd already wasted, plus another hour to get her to definitive care, she could suffer permanent damage. The rescue team started the careful process of carrying Tessa down the mountain. The boyfriend went with them, holding her hand, whispering reassurances. I hiked back to my plane and flew home, my hands shaking on the controls. That evening, I called the hospital. Tessa was in surgery. The doctors were cautiously optimistic, but said the delay in treatment had complicated things. She had a fractured vertebra and significant swelling in her spinal cord. It was too early to know if she'd regain function in her legs. I barely slept that night. I kept thinking about the what-ifs. What if the air ambulance had been able to land at my strip? They could have had Tessa on an operating table in 20 minutes instead of 2 hours. What if that delay was the difference between her walking again or not? The next morning, I called Rachel Kowalski, the reporter. "I have an update for you," I said, and told her about Tessa. The story ran the next day. "Hiker's life hangs in balance as HOA dispute continues." It detailed Tessa's injury and the delays in getting her to care. It quoted medical experts about the importance of rapid treatment for spinal injuries. And it included a statement from Travis Chen, the flight paramedic, saying that the helicopter could have reached Tessa in minutes if they'd been able to use my airstrip. The public outcry reached a fever pitch. The HOA's office was flooded with calls and emails. Protesters showed up at Patricia Lundgren's house with signs. Local politicians started weighing in, calling for the HOA to reverse its decision. And then, something unexpected happened. The other 2 board members who'd voted with Patricia, a man named Kenneth Reeves and a woman named Susan Hartley, released a joint statement saying they'd changed their minds. They now believed the cease and desist order should be lifted. That meant the board was split 3-2 in my favor, but Patricia, as president, refused to call a new vote. She claimed the original decision stood unless overturned by a formal appeal, which would take weeks. The recall election couldn't come fast enough. I spent the weeks leading up to it doing everything I could to support the effort. I attended community meetings, spoke to residents, and shared the facts about the airstrip and its importance. Patricia, meanwhile, was digging in. She claimed I was manipulating the media and stirring up hysteria. She said the recall was orchestrated by outsiders who didn't understand the community's needs. She even suggested that I was profiting somehow from the publicity, though she never explained how. On election day, I voted early and then spent the rest of the day anxiously waiting for results. The polls closed at 7 in the evening. By 9, the outcome was clear. Patricia and her 2 allies were recalled by overwhelming margins. Melinda Garrison was elected the new president. The residents had spoken, and they wanted change. The new board held an emergency meeting 2 days later. Their first order of business was to rescind the cease and desist order against my airstrip. The vote was unanimous. I got the call from Melinda at 6 in the evening. "Aaron, it's done. You're free to resume normal operations. I'm also drafting a formal letter to the County Emergency Services Department apologizing for the disruption and confirming that they're welcome to use your property whenever needed." I felt a wave of relief so powerful I had to sit down. "Thank you, Melinda. You have no idea what this means. I think I do. This whole situation has been a nightmare. Patricia let her ego get in the way of common sense, and people could have died because of it. What happens to her now? Legally? Probably nothing. Being a terrible HOA president isn't a crime, but her reputation in this community is destroyed. I don't think she'll be able to show her face around here anymore. I called Travis immediately to give him the news. He whooped with joy. This is huge, Aaron. I'm going to update our protocols right now. You just made my team's job a whole lot easier. And potentially saved a lot of lives. Damn right. The next morning, I walked out to my airstrip and just stood there for a while, watching the sunrise over the mountains. It felt like the first time I could truly breathe in months. The fight was over. Common sense had prevailed. A week later, I got a call from Tessa's boyfriend, whose name was Connor. I wanted to thank you, he said, for helping us that day on the mountain. How's Tessa doing? She's out of the hospital. The doctors say she's going to make a full recovery. She's got a long road of physical therapy ahead, but she's already getting some feeling back in her legs. I felt tears prickling my eyes. That's incredible news. The doctor said if she'd gotten to surgery even an hour later, the outcome might have been very different. You being there, stabilizing her, keeping her calm, it made a difference. I just did what anyone would do. No, not anyone. You risked a lot to help her, and you fought to make sure other people won't face the same delays. Tessa and I both want to thank you in person. We're planning to come up to Clearwater Peaks next month when she's cleared to travel. Can we take you to dinner? I'd like that. 2 weeks after the recall election, I was contacted by the county commissioners. They wanted to formally recognize my airstrip as a designated emergency landing zone and add it to their official maps and protocols. There would be some paperwork and a site inspection, but it was essentially a done deal. We should have done this years ago, Commissioner Thomas Brennan told me during a meeting at the county offices. You provided a valuable public service, and instead of supporting you, the system made you fight for it. That's unacceptable. I appreciate the support now, I said. But I have a question. What happens if another HOA tries to pull something like this? Is my airstrip protected? Barbara Stevenson, the county attorney, answered. We're working on a county ordinance that would prohibit HOAs from interfering with designated emergency facilities. It's not law yet, but it will be soon. Your situation exposed a gap in our regulations, and we're fixing it. So some good came out of all this? More than you know. We've identified 3 other private properties in the county that could serve as emergency landing zones. We're reaching out to those owners now. Because of what you went through, we're building a more robust emergency response network. That made the whole ordeal feel worthwhile. In late October, I met Connor and Tessa for dinner at a restaurant in town. Tessa was using a walker but moving steadily. Her spirits were high. I can't believe I'm actually walking, she said, her eyes shining. 3 months ago, the doctors weren't sure I ever would again. You're a fighter, I said, and you're a hero. Connor told me what you did, flying your plane up there, hiking in to help me. I don't think I ever properly thanked you. No thanks necessary. I'm just glad you're okay. We talked for hours about everything. Tessa and Connor were both graduate students at the University of Colorado. They loved hiking and had been exploring the Clearwater Peak area all summer. Tessa's accident had been a freak thing, a loose rock that gave way under her foot. Are you going to keep hiking? I asked. Absolutely, Tessa said without hesitation. What happened was scary, but I'm not going to let fear control my life. Although I will probably be a lot more careful about where I put my feet. We laughed. It felt good to see her so positive and strong. As we were leaving the restaurant, Tessa said, Aaron, there's something else. Connor and I are planning to get married next summer. We'd love it if you could be there. I was genuinely touched. I'd be honored. Life slowly returned to normal after that. The airstrip was back in operation. I flew regularly, enjoying the freedom of the sky and the beauty of the Colorado mountains. The air ambulance landed at my property a few more times that fall, each time making me grateful that the fight had been worthwhile. Patricia Lundgren, true to Melinda's prediction, became a pariah in the community. She put her house up for sale in November and moved away before Christmas. I heard through the grapevine that she'd relocated to Arizona. I hoped she'd learn something from the experience, but I wasn't optimistic. The new HOA board, led by Melinda, took a completely different approach to governance. They focused on genuine community building rather than petty rule enforcement. They organized volunteer events, improved common areas, and actually listened to residents' concerns. It was remarkable what competent, compassionate leadership could accomplish. In December, the county ordinance protecting emergency facilities passed unanimously. The local paper ran a story about it, mentioning my case as the catalyst for the change. I got calls from several other property owners in rural areas asking for advice about setting up their own emergency landing zones. One of those calls was from a rancher named Bill Tucker, who owned land near the San Juan Mountains. He had a grass strip on his property and wanted to make it available for search and rescue operations. "I read about what you went through," Bill said. "Dealing with that HOA sounds like a nightmare, but you stuck with it and made a difference. That inspired me. If I can help save lives, I want to do it." "Let me connect you with the County Emergency Services Department," I said. "They're actively building out their network of landing zones. They'll help you get set up." By the end of the year, 3 new emergency landing zones had been established in rural parts of the county. The Director of Emergency Services, Daniel Morrison, sent me a thank you note saying that our collective efforts had already reduced average response times by 12% in mountain rescue situations. "Lives will be saved because of what you started," he wrote. "Thank you for having the courage to fight for what was right." I framed that letter and hung it in my office. Connor and Tessa's wedding was in July of the following year. It was a small ceremony in a garden venue with views of the mountains. Tessa walked down the aisle without assistance, her recovery complete. During the reception, Connor gave a toast thanking everyone who'd helped them through the darkest time of their lives. "A year ago, our future was uncertain," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Tessa was injured, and we didn't know if she'd walk again. But because of the quick actions of rescuers, doctors, and a pilot who refused to give up fighting for what was right, she's here today, healthy and whole. Aaron, this one's for you." The guests raised their glasses in my direction. I felt my face flush, uncomfortable with the attention, but deeply moved by the gesture. After the ceremony, I talked with Travis Chen, who'd also been invited. He'd become a friend over the past year, and we'd flown together several times. "You know what the best part of all this is?" Travis said, watching Tessa and Connor dance. "It's not just that the airstrip is back in operation. It's that the whole system changed. Because you fought your battle publicly, people started paying attention to these issues. The county fixed its regulations. Other property owners stepped up. Emergency response across the whole region improved." "I never intended to start a movement," I said. "I just wanted to keep flying and help people when I could." "That's what makes it even better. You weren't looking for glory or recognition. You just did what was right, and it created a ripple effect." That night, driving home under a sky full of stars, I reflected on everything that had happened. The fight with Patricia and the HOA had been exhausting and frustrating. There were moments when I'd wanted to give up, to just sell my property and move somewhere without the hassle. But I'd stuck it out, and it had mattered. Not just for me, but for Tessa and Connor, for future hikers who'd need rescue, for the paramedics who could now do their jobs more effectively. One person standing up to bureaucratic nonsense had created real, positive change. A few months after the wedding, I was working in my hangar on a Saturday morning when a car pulled up. A family got out, parents and 2 kids, maybe 8 and 10 years old. The father approached me nervously. "Are you Aaron Vance?" "I am." "My name's Robert Davidson. I hope we're not intruding. My kids have been asking to meet you ever since they heard your story. They think you're a hero." I laughed. "I don't know about that." The 2 kids, a boy and a girl, came running over. The girl was holding a drawing she'd made of a small plane and a helicopter. At the bottom, in careful kid handwriting, it said, "Thank you for helping people." "We learned about you in school," the boy said excitedly. "Our teacher told us how you fought the HOA to save hikers. That's so cool." "I just did what needed to be done," I said, accepting the drawing. "But thank you. This is really special." "Can we see your plane?" the girl asked. I spent the next hour giving the family a tour of my Cessna, explaining how it worked and answering a million questions from the kids. Robert told me they'd recently moved to the area and were impressed by the community's focus on emergency preparedness. "It's good to know that if something happens when we're out hiking, there are people looking out for us," he said. "What you did made this a safer place to live." After they left, I pinned the kids' drawing to the wall of my hangar, right next to the framed letter from Daniel Morrison. These small moments of connection and gratitude meant more to me than any official recognition could. The following winter was harsh, with heavy snowfall and dangerous avalanche conditions. The Clearwater Peak trails were closed for much of January and February, but backcountry skiers still ventured into the area. Inevitably, there were accidents. One Sunday afternoon in February, I was at home reading when I heard the familiar sound of the air ambulance approaching. I went to the window and watched as it circled once and then descended to my airstrip. The landing was smooth despite gusty winds. I grabbed my coat and walked down to see if they needed anything. Travis was on the crew that day. He waved when he saw me. "Hey, Aaron, thanks for keeping the strip clear. The county plow did the access road this morning?" "Yeah, they've been great about maintaining it since it became an official emergency zone. We're picking up a skier who triggered an avalanche and got partially buried. He's hypothermic but conscious. We're taking him to the trauma center in Denver. Good luck. Stay safe up there." The helicopter lifted off 5 minutes later, carrying its precious cargo. I watched it disappear over the mountains, feeling a deep satisfaction. This was what it was all about. This was why the fight had mattered. In the spring, I received an invitation to speak at a regional conference on emergency medical services. They wanted me to talk about my experience with the HOA and the importance of community cooperation in emergency response. I was nervous about public speaking, but Marcus convinced me to do it. "Your story has power," he said. "Other people are dealing with similar bureaucratic obstacles. If you can inspire them to fight back, or better yet, if you can convince communities to be proactive about supporting emergency services, you'll be doing a lot of good." The conference was in Denver, held at a downtown hotel. There were about 200 attendees, mostly paramedics, firefighters, and emergency management professionals. I was scheduled to speak on the second day, right after lunch. When my turn came, I walked to the podium with my notes, my heart pounding. But once I started talking, the nervousness faded. I told the story chronologically, from Patricia's first ambush to the recall election to the formation of the expanded emergency landing zone network. "The lesson I learned," I said in closing, "is that bureaucracy should serve people, not the other way around. When rules get in the way of saving lives, the rules need to change. It took months of fighting, legal fees, media attention, and a lot of stress. But it was worth it, because now when someone gets hurt in the mountains near my home, help can reach them faster. That's what matters." The applause was loud and sustained. Afterwards, dozens of people came up to talk to me, sharing their own stories of bureaucratic obstacles and asking for advice. A fire chief from a rural county in Wyoming told me they were facing a similar issue with a landowner who wanted to establish a helicopter landing zone but was being blocked by county regulations. "Use the media," I advised. "Public pressure works, and document everything. Build an ironclad case for why what you're trying to do serves the public good. Then make it impossible for bureaucrats to say no." That evening, Travis called me. "Saw your speech. Someone posted video of it online. It's getting a lot of attention." "Seriously?" "Yeah, you're becoming kind of famous in the EMS community. People are calling you the guy who took on an HOA and won." I laughed. "That's a weird thing to be famous for." "It's a good thing. You're raising awareness about issues that matter. Keep it up." Over the next few months, I did a few more speaking engagements and interviews. I tried to use the platform responsibly, always emphasizing that the real heroes were the paramedics and first responders doing dangerous work every day. I was just a guy who'd refused to back down when confronted with an unjust rule. In June, Connor and Tessa came to visit. Tessa was training for a half marathon, her recovery nothing short of miraculous. We hiked together on the lower trails near my property, taking it easy, enjoying the summer weather. "Do you ever think about how different things could have been?" Connor asked at one point. "If the helicopter had been able to land at your strip that day, if you hadn't been there to help us?" "All the time," I admitted. "It haunts me a little, knowing how close we came to a tragic outcome." But it wasn't tragic, Tessa said firmly. I'm here. I'm healthy. And because of what you went through, other people are going to be okay too. You changed the system, Aaron. That matters. We reached a viewpoint overlooking the valley. The airstrip was visible in the distance, a green ribbon cutting through my property. From here, it looked so small and insignificant. But I knew better. That strip of grass had become a symbol of something much larger. The idea that individuals can fight back against bureaucratic overreach, that communities can choose compassion over rigid rule following, that sometimes the right thing to do is also the hardest thing to do. I'm glad it worked out, I said quietly. I'm glad you're okay. And I'm glad that the next person who needs help won't have to wait as long as you did. As we stood there watching the sun sink toward the mountains, I felt at peace. The battle with Patricia and the HOA had been brutal, but it had taught me important lessons about persistence, community, and the power of doing what's right even when it's difficult. My airstrip wasn't just a runway anymore. It was a lifeline, a connection between people in crisis and the help they desperately needed. I was proud to be its steward. The years that followed were quieter. The airstrip continued to serve its dual purpose, a place for me to indulge my passion for flying and a critical emergency resource for the community. The county maintained it as part of their official network, occasionally sending crews to mow and grade the surface. I flew regularly, exploring the mountain ranges and valleys of Colorado, sometimes taking friends up for scenic flights. Every time I took off from that strip, I thought about the journey that had nearly taken it away from me, and I felt grateful for the outcome. Patricia Lundgren never returned to Clearwater Peaks. I heard she'd joined another HOA board in Arizona and was causing trouble there, but I didn't follow the details. Some people never learn. Melinda Garrison remained HOA president for several years, bringing stability and common sense to the role. Under her leadership, the community thrived. Property values increased, not because of strict rule enforcement, but because people genuinely wanted to live in a place that valued cooperation and mutual support. Travis Chen and I became close friends. We flew together often, and he introduced me to other pilots and paramedics in the emergency services community. I found a sense of belonging among these people who dedicated their lives to helping others. One afternoon in late autumn, 5 years after the initial confrontation with Patricia, I was sitting on my porch watching the sunset when a helicopter approached. It was the air ambulance, and it landed smoothly on the strip. But this time, no one was hurt. Travis climbed out and walked up to the house. "What's going on?" I asked. "Is this a social call?" "Sort of. We're doing a training exercise in the area, and I wanted to stop by. Also, I have news. I'm retiring next month." "Retiring? You're too young to retire?" "I'm moving into a desk job, actually. Training coordinator for the county EMS. Fewer night shifts, more regular hours. My wife is thrilled." "Congratulations, you've earned it." We sat on the porch and talked for an hour, reminiscing about the past 5 years and all the lives saved, all the emergencies responded to. The airstrip had been used 47 times for medical evacuations during that period. 47 people who'd gotten the help they needed faster because of our fight. "You know what I'll remember most about all this?" Travis said as he prepared to leave. "It's not the drama with the HOA or the media attention. It's the fact that one guy, doing the right thing for the right reasons, made a real difference. That's rare, Aaron. Most people talk about making a difference. You actually did it." After he left, I stayed on the porch as darkness fell and stars began to appear. The mountains loomed black against the deepening blue sky. Somewhere out there, people were hiking, camping, exploring the wilderness. And if something went wrong, if someone got hurt, help would come quickly. That knowledge, that certainty was worth everything I'd gone through. The stress, the legal fees, the confrontations, the uncertainty. All of it had led to something meaningful and lasting. I thought about the drawing from Robert Davidson's Kids, still hanging in my hangar. I thought about Tessa walking down the aisle at her wedding. I thought about all the families who'd been reunited with injured loved ones because emergency services could do their jobs effectively. One person standing up to an unjust rule had created ripples that spread far beyond what I could have imagined. It wasn't about being a hero. It was simply about refusing to accept a bad situation when I had the power to change it. As I finally went inside, I took one last look at the airstrip. In the moonlight, it gleamed silver and peaceful. Tomorrow, it might save another life. And the day after that, and the day after that. That was its purpose now, and I was honored to be its guardian. The fight with the HOA had tried to take that away, but the community had spoken. Common sense and compassion had prevailed over petty bureaucracy. And in the end, that was the story I wanted to remember. Not the conflict, but the resolution. Not the obstacles, but the triumph. Not the problem, but the solution. The airstrip remained, a testament to what happens when people choose to do what's right instead of what's easy. And every time a helicopter landed there, carrying hope and help to someone in need, the fight was proven worthwhile all over again.